So we've been talking about um, our histograms, right? Our population pyramids, and we've talked a lot about um, what makes a population grow. But we want to look, and so that's really birth rate, right? Is what's making a population grow, and you should be looking at the PowerPoint previous to this for that information. But now we're going to look at what things actually affect death rate. And so we look at things like life expectancy and infant mortality rate. And so, why are people living longer in certain developed countries? Mostly because we have this increased food supply and distribution, right, and ability to actually get the food, better nutrition overall, better medical advances, and improved sanitation. And so when we look at death rate, first we're going to look at infant mortality rate. And we've talked about it before, but the US is, you know, not very impressive when it comes to infant mortality rate. We have almost 6 infant deaths per 1,000 births, which is not very good, especially thinking about the country that we live in. And it's high due to a few things: inadequate health care for poor women during pregnancy, and then afterwards with their infants, drug addiction among pregnant women, and then teenage pregnancy. And the infant mortality rates are dropping, so that's good news. But you can definitely see that infant mortality rate is much, much higher in these less developed countries than in these more developed countries. And here is a map about infant mortality rates in 2010. So not super recent, but they're grouping it together from 2 to 9. So even though we fall in that category, we're still not the best, right? But right, these developing countries in Africa, India, the Middle East, you can see these countries are definitely have a very high infant mortality rate. And so human death rates can be from a few things beyond infant mortality. We're looking at beyond infancy, and these can be an acute disease or an epidemic. So, like right now, it'd be like the flu, right? It's very acute, and it appears very rapidly. It affects a huge population of a huge percentage of the population, and then it can disappear or possibly reappear later. Whereas a chronic disease is always present, and it typically occurs in relatively small amounts, but is constant. And so this can be things like heart disease and cancer. Um, One disease that we look at can be the AIDS epidemic. I'm sorry, the AIDS epidemic. And so we lost 27 million people from 1981 to 2009. And so you're losing a lot of productive workers. You're losing a lot of individuals that were in their reproductive years. And then also, there was a sharp drop in life expectancy during this time period. Um, Obviously, HIV can be reduced through education and healthcare. There are lots of antivirals in there now that can actually make people not contagious, which is pretty awesome. And there's also financial assistance and volunteers to help that educate and to help with the healthcare of these populations that have a high rate of HIV. So an example would be Botswana. And so with AIDS, you can see that the population drops off very quickly. And so a lot of people died. And if you think of these people here dying off, um, that has a major effect on Botswana's economic development. So it's this life expectancy that can also affect economics, because the people that are in these productive years of working are not available to work because they've died. Um, a really, really important thing, and I apologize for this cutting off. Something's going on with my computer. And I can't get this off the bottom bar, so you can even see it's 8:01. Um, anyway, demographic transition is a very important thing that we need to look at. And so, as countries develop, the population growth um, will speed up, slow down. And so we're going to look at that. We're going to look specifically at the 4 stages. So pre-industrial, transitional, industrial, and post-industrial. And here is a look at what's happening. So you can see here, pre-industrial, my population growth is in green here, and your birth rates in red, and your death rates in blue. And so it's kind of a crazy jumble of birth and death rates. And so you end up with this really slow increase in population growth. In transitional, you actually have a very, very high population growth where it starts to even out in the industrial phase. And finally, it kind of evens out and completely and then starts to drop. And so here it is in words. I would suggest honing in on this slide right here. Again, right, population's growing very slowly. Population grows super rapid because the death rates are starting to drop. In stage 3, the birth rates are dropping and the death rates have dropped, so they're kind of caught up with each other, starting to even out. And finally, in the post-industrial, the population growth will level off and then fall again. And so here it is again in words. So I will skip that again. So IPAT is actually one of these formulas that you guys need to know, and the impact of the human population on its environment, I, is equal to how large the population size, our affluence of the country or of that population, so how well off that population is, and then finally how much technology the population has available to them. So obviously the larger these numbers are, the larger the population, the larger the affluence, the larger the technology, that's going to increase our impact on the environment. And so as we have more and more people, we use more raw materials, we use more land, we use more energy, and we produce more waste, which means that we're going to end up having a lot more pollution. And we'll talk about solid waste coming up very soon. Now, when we have these populations, we need to feed these people. And so food security is that people actually have enough access to food to be healthy and active. And so there are lots of places on this earth, even within our own city, where people are chronically hungry and malnourished. And so malnutrition can lead to a weakened immune system, illness and disease, all kinds of problems that we see with chronic hunger and malnutrition. And so you can see here that there's hunger and food shortages by country. The obvious areas you would think, but it would be interesting to look at this on just within our country. I don't have that map available, unfortunately. But how do we solve this problem where people are hungry? Well, we can promote economic development of developing countries. And so by increasing their economics, we can help them have access to food. We can provide access to the food and the land resources for the people who live in the areas that don't have